Yeah, that's better.
Excellent. All right. So just taking it and welcome to VentureJect. We are here with our podcast, welcoming experts again and again to speak on the latest and greatest insights in health and fitness. And today we are very, very happy to have you with us today, Lubna. So perhaps you will just briefly introduce yourself.
Thanks, Peter. Thank you so much for having me on. So I was a former plastic surgeon in the NHS, and then I have since pivoted to working in longevity medicine. It's a real passion of mine. I'm really interested in women's health and understanding the trajectory of women as they age and the unique implications for women. So so that's what I do now.
Excellent. Thank you. And exactly, women's health is the topic of today. It's a topic that has perhaps for much too long been overlooked. There is a just as big discrepancy between men's health and female health as there is between the genders. So it is a topic that is receiving as finally a lot more interest. And I want to kick off today, since this is the topic about, so from you coming from a medical background and today dedicating yourself to female health. So what do you see are the differences in female health versus men's health, and why is it so crucial that we make this distinction now?
Well, thank you. It's a really good place to start because I feel like the difference between men's health span and women's health span is the foundation for everything else that we're going to talk about. And it's really important to understand that women outlive men. We tend to have an advantage when it comes to the longevity side of things. But when it comes to living in good health and health span, women tend to live a decade longer in poorer health than our male counterparts. And that is not a statistical anomaly, it's a real fact that women are living much longer in poorer chronic health conditions. And it's because of a systemic wide failure in sort of like including women in medical trials, in understanding women's physiology as we're aging, and building a healthcare system around it. So we have a lot of failure and misunderstanding when it comes to women's health and the unique needs of women as we age.
Absolutely, and that's also where the medical establishment is now, shall we say, finally catching up by prioritizing it a lot more these years than has been done in the many past decades. So when you look at your clients and the work you do, what is the typical difference, would you say, between those those females who invest in their health and those who more like gamble that I will have the same health in 20 years?
I think it's about understanding. So a lot of the clients so we're building a very much female-focused longevity clinic with the idea that there is a lost decade when it comes to women's health. It's not, obviously it's really important, and it's been fabulous that over the last few years we're playing catch up in bringing perimenopause and menopause into medical terminology. People no longer are treating it as a taboo. That is becoming something that people are feeling more comfortable talking about. But what we found, and what I found over the last sort of like 6 years of being in private practice and longevity medicine, is that there's this foundational window of opportunity that begins a lot earlier than just menopause. Unfortunately, with the way women's health is treated, it's put into silos and buckets, and women's health tends to be either just about fertility or just about menopause and hot flushes and things like that. But essentially there's this whole decade that happens before, and it's a vital window. And so when the women that tend to be healthier and feel more empowered about aging are those who have more agency over themselves, know their bodies, are proactive and understand. We now know that, for example, things like bone density. So as women, we're unique in terms of the way our hormone profile changes. men don't have the cliff edge that women do. So we have this slow decline over perimenopause, which can be 10 years, and then, a faster decline during menopause. But it happens a lot earlier. So maximum bone density, we now know, is in our late 20s. So that's when it's a prime time to start thinking about having something like a DEXA scan and then looking after your bone density. But the way we work, for example, in the NHS in the UK, women aren't offered a DEXA scan until they're way into their 60s, and that osteoporosis process has already happened. Similarly, when we think about heart disease, post-menopause, because our hormone estrogen is so protective over so many, it's virtually in every cell of our body. So it affects everything from our brains, our hearts, our bones, our muscles, so every system. So you get this organ-wide sort of like failure. And so what happens with like a heart disease? So post-menopause, women are getting higher rates of heart disease. So these are the things that we need to understand, that the earlier we act, the better it is. And so that lost decade that we have, 30s, 40s, such a prime time to start thinking about these things. So it's about agency, knowing your body, and being really proactive in terms of your health and well-being.
Absolutely. I think also what you're playing into and mentioning there, the conversation on Healthspan and longevity. The body is a complicated system, right? And normally it doesn't show signs of weakening until it is. Well, is it too late, or can you still fix things? Because when you have signs of onset of osteoporosis, if you get a DEXA scan only in your 60s, starting to build bone health in your 60s seems to be too late. I don't know if that is if that is like too hard of a conclusion to make.
No, I don't think it's ever too late to make changes. We know that even with small little changes, small steps can make a huge difference to your health and well-being. And, those little small steps can compound over time. So, we meet people where they are in terms of their health journey. I think it's about knowledge. So with what I'm trying to describe with the lost decade, it can sound scary, and it might make people feel like it's too late for me, but it's never too late. So, there are studies being done where, they've given people who are in their 90s in a nursing home strength exercises, mobility exercises, and shown great improvement. So it doesn't matter where you are in your age, where you are in terms of your health status, there's always things that you can do. And it's the small changes. So we always say it's the low-hanging fruit. So it's not longevity. Sometimes, particularly with like the bro science and people like Brian Johnson, it can seem like it's sort of like high tech and you need all the money in the world, you need to be a billionaire, you need to be in Silicon Valley and have all the tech. But it's actually with the really simple things: how you move your body, how you eat, how you manage stress, how you sleep, your community, the connections you have around you, all those things, are foundational. And then everything else is like the cherry on top. So, it's health is that it's a practice. It takes, dedication. It's like a daily thing. It's not like something that needs to be done overnight, but it's done in community as well. So with guidance. So I think, all those things are really important.
No, I think there is it's a really good point you make, right? That there is no one thing that solves this. There's no magic pill, not even Wegovy, maybe least of all. But when you're looking into these decades, the 30s, the 40s, the 50s, and how one should be looking into the next decade while we are in the current one. How does it change over the decades? What should be in focus?
That's a really good question, and I think it's great, because I think it's about perspective and understanding. At the moment, the way healthcare is, particularly where I am in the UK, everything tends to be siloed. You work in your own little specialty. You take little every specialty takes a part of the body and we treat it differently. But I think for women in particular, it's about understanding that your health is a continuum. So what happens, so we go through many hormonal shifts in our lives. So if you think about from puberty, pregnancy, if you do have a baby, that period of matrescence in terms of having a baby, the changes, then your perimenopause, your menopause and beyond. And it's a whole continuum. So I think for women, it's that awareness of what's happening to your body each decade. And like I said, so for example, with bone density and bone changes, so our maximum bone density is in our late 20s. So it's understanding that through your 20s, 30s, all those exercises, it's about reframing what movement and exercise is about as well. So we like to say you want to train for what you want to retain. So functional exercise, instead of exercise being about being skinny and having your summer body, about understanding that everything you do in each decade is about protecting that next decade that you have ahead of you. Similarly with brain health, understanding that those changes, so women post-menopause have got twice the risk of Alzheimer's disease because we've got estrogen receptors in our brain and it's neuroprotective. So there's loads of things happening in women's brains as well. So understanding that for each decade is about protecting your future health and how you see yourself in your later decades. So your 20s, 30s, 40s, the slow decline of your vital hormones, and then how you can sort of protect your heart, your bones, your brain. Being sort of very nuanced about it. It's about knowing yourself as well, like understanding, because what works for one person is very different for another. So knowing your baseline, knowing your bloods, your VO2 max, all those key biomarkers that you can keep a track on, so that you've got a real foundational understanding of what's happening underneath the hood, then what you want to aim for your next decade.
Yeah, and exactly about biomarkers. So there is this popular phrase going around, right? That health is wealth. Also because phonetically it sounds it lies well on the tongue, right? It sits well on the tongue. But we as a species, we tend to, like, when we are faced with the choice, what do I want to feel good now, or do I want to feel good in 10 years? Like people, male and female, tend to feel good now rather in 10 years. It's like, that's a problem for future me.
Yeah.
When you speak to your clients, like, how do you help them overcome this bias so that we seem to have?
Well, there's a huge bias, isn't there? I mean, I agree. I think health is our greatest wealth, and there is a bias, and particularly I would say coming from, so obviously I was trained in plastic surgery, I went into cosmetic surgery. So, the women that I see, there is a huge component where there is a big judgmental factor when it comes to the aging process, particularly for women. We've lived through decades and decades of this anti-aging narrative. There's snake oil, there's lots of products, there's treatments, there's so many things aimed and targeted particularly towards women. And so there's this real burden, psychologically, financially on women to do with like looking younger. But for us, like particularly in clinic and when we do consultations, it's about that reframe, because we tend to kick the bucket down the road when it comes to the aging process. And it's about reframing what aging is about and feeling empowered about it, as opposed to being scared about the aging process, and knowing that your second half can be as powerful and stronger than your first half. Now that we're living longer and we've, with modern medicine, lifespan has doubled. We've done an amazing job in terms of keeping people alive. But like I said, in terms of Healthspan, keeping people healthy, we've not been so great at that. And it is about knowledge and understanding. And now that women are living into their 80s, 90s, like, how do you see your future self? And demographically, in terms of our populations, I mean, UK is facing really low birth rates. By 2050, more than a third of the population will be over 60. So it's been understanding that it's so vital. Like, aging is now, it's not something that happens in the future. As soon as we're born, we're aging. So it's about reframing what aging is about, and that it can be empowering, it can be powerful, and that we are in control of it as well, because the pace of our aging isn't about how many candles on our birthday, but it's about the way we live our lives. And I think having that knowledge and understanding that the choices you make today will empower and dictate how you age tomorrow. I think that's a real powerful message, and I think it really empowers women to understand that it's not just about the way you look, it's about the way you feel, and when you feel good, you look good as well.
Yeah, but that's also like in ancient Greece, right? The philosophers were also talking about like it is with life as with a book. It's not how long it is, but how good it is that matters, right? So, and speaking of how good it is, I do not remember the source, but I believe I saw an article that was comparing men's health to female health, and how big a percentage of the total health lifespan was spent in good health and in ill health. And it was just like it was so much higher percentage of a female lifespan that was in ill health because of those many differences.
Yeah.
So how does that how do you help your clients understand that it's just a natural process of being a female, that you are going through all of these processes, hormonal processes?
It goes back to that the initial sort of like opening question about the difference between health span between men and women. So, women are living longer, and we tend to outlive men by sort of like quite a few years, but then women are living in poorer health, and it's because we're missing the boat. So it's not inevitable that women have to live in poorer health. It's because systemically we've been denied the knowledge and the information over our bodies and the way women age. And so if we now get into conversations, that's why podcasts like this and the information is really important, so that women, I've got 2 daughters, they're 9 and 4, but I have great hope for the younger generations, because they're now getting more comfortable with talking about things like periods, talking about perimenopause, menopause, and understanding fundamentally what's happening to their bodies as they age. We've had a whole generation through lots of failures to do with like the Women's Health Initiative, to do with hormones. We've had whole generations of women who have been so let down by a health service and not understanding their bodies. So we've got generations of women who, suffering from Alzheimer's, suffering from recurrent, urinary tract infections, which then lead to hip fractures. So many unnecessary health complications because they've been let down by fundamentally the knowledge in the health service. So we're still playing catch up. So I think it's about understanding that health gap between men and women isn't inevitable. It's because we've got this big gap, and I think it's incumbent on all of us as women to have agency over ourselves and understand that the power is in our hands. And I think the more we're now understanding this, and this is the beauty, I think, of longevity. Longevity sometimes gets a bad press because people think it's gimmicky and there's not enough evidence behind a lot of the new sort of technology, things like peptides and things. But essentially, longevity is about aging well. It's about our own health and how we can feel empowered by it. And I think if we bring it back to the roots of, every doctor wants to be a longevity doctor. We want to do well by our patients. We're just let down by the sort of like the health demands, the services that we're in, because we haven't caught up. But, hopefully the more conversations like this we have, the more we'll catch up. And I think it's really foundational that, we just are more proactive about our health, because we just don't. We wait for symptoms to appear, and often that can be too late.
Yeah. Let's not wait for symptoms. It's about, as you were saying initially, about being proactive, and that's also where we usually go into now in the last 10 minutes here of our podcast. Also go into the how. So we have established like what is the difference between male and female health. Why is it so crucial? Because there are these big differences, and women are living more years in poorer health than men. So and that we know now, we have established it again at least. So now comes the really interesting parts, like how can we act on this? Because like I'm sure many of our viewers out there would also like to hear your insights, your takes on, okay, I understand. I'm a woman in my 30s or my 40s or my 50s. Lubna, what should I do?
So I think it's so breaking it down. So now that we understand that how foundational estrogen and our hormones are to our bodies, it's understanding. So that, break it down. What can I do to protect my heart? What can I do to protect my bones and my muscles? What can I do to protect my brain? And then everything else to do with your body. So it's prioritizing again the real foundations: how you eat, how you move, how you sleep, how you manage stress, and then really important thing that we often forget is our connections and the community that we're in. Like we're social beings, and I think social isolation, particularly extreme social isolation in our later years, is akin to have smoked like 20 cigarettes a day. So I think it's understanding, having a community around you. Strength training is really foundational, maintaining your muscle mass, your bone density, so all those things. So when you're doing your exercises, it's about being intentional as to why you're doing them. So having an aim towards your training, so your bone density, your muscle, all that resistance training. In terms of your diet, we know how beneficial, particularly things like the Mediterranean diet, looking after your oily fishes, your omegas for your heart, your omega-3, thinking about targeted supplementation. So supplements are there to supplement a diet, but you can't supplement your way through a bad diet. So looking at your diet and then supplements that can help with that. Thinking about your brain health, so all the things that you can do to offset sort of like dementia and Alzheimer's, and then overall sort of like your gut health and everything. So I think just being really sort of like intentional over the way you live your life, like lifestyle choices, and then knowing your body, so that agency, so the key biomarkers. I mean, the reason we would love to partner with Venturejet, things like VO2 max. If I could give every woman one key biomarker which encompasses everything, something like your VO2 max is so essential, because maintaining that good VO2 max that you have in your 30s and 40s, because we know how much it declines as you age. And a low VO2 max is known to be associated with dementia risk, metabolic disease, cardiorespiratory diseases, all the things, those 4 key sort of like horsemen of aging. So knowing your key biomarkers is really important. And then again, just sustaining that community and, joy in your life, extending your joy span. You want to, in your later years, it shouldn't be about frailty and decline. It should be about being able to do all the things that you enjoy. Thinking, I've had my children later in life, so I'm a much older mum. So the things that motivate me is that I want to still be able to run around with my children as they get older, and if I'm lucky to have grandchildren, to be able to be fit and healthy and around. We've just suffered the loss of my father-in-law, who had Alzheimer's for many years, and it's been a really, really sad process as a family to see him decline, because you're losing that person in real time, as well as like the bereavement. And so just things like that you realize how you want to see yourself in the long term. So yeah.
And I think it's a really interesting point that you're making there. Like, there is, of course, all of the things that we can do ourselves: eat, sleep, train, so on. That is within our own control. It's what I, with my own hands, put in my mouth, or how I move.
Yeah.
But there is that 5th component that you mentioned, right? The social thing that you can't do alone, right? You have to involve other people, else we are by definition not social, right? And it's just so interesting to remember to really think about that, and to hold on to activities or so, where like communal activities, right? Here in the office, a few weeks ago, we had an 81-year-old lady from the local rowing club who, and out of curiosity, we invited her to the office just to see her VO2 max, and it was for her age range in the elite, in the very highest quartile. And 81 years of age, right? So jumping up the 2 flights of stairs and stuff. Of course, it's bound to affect our quality of life. So because one thing is longevity, but the other thing is really like reframing it into what is quality, like what will make me smile when I get out of bed in the morning.
Yeah, there's no point living, like adding years to your life if you don't have life in those years. So it is about that quality of life. I mean, I've got one of my oldest clients is 96, and she's just that beautiful example of how mindset is everything. You know, she does Pilates and strength training 3 times a week. She golfs. She's part of the Women's Institute. You know, she's very active socially, and she's just proof that, you know, we just have ridiculous notions over aging in our society. You know, we still live in a very ageist society, and there's this, you know, even like the symbols, you know, when you look on the road signs in the UK, you know, there's like pictures of frail elderly people at road crossings, and that is not what aging is about. You know, there are so many prime examples now of women who have aged beautifully and powerfully, and you know, it shouldn't be about decline and frailty. You know, we can all age really well, and that's the dream, isn't it? You know, to not have to have those years of dependence and losing your independence and your you know, viability. I think it's beautiful to have like an 81-year-old as part of a rowing club and stuff. You know, that's great. That's the kind of role models that I want to see, and what we want to promote, like with the clinic that we have, is about those role models and understanding that you can thrive at any age. And yeah, like you say, the community is everything. You know, that buzz you have when you're around your friends and your family and the people that you enjoy being around, you know, you can't replace that feeling. And we know, when you look at, you know, the blue zones around the world, you know, places where people live the longest, you know, they live in communities, and it's that intergenerational sort of, like, you know, I was speaking to a gentleman yesterday whose family are from Europe, and you know, there's 3 generations in one household, you know, and that's so beautiful. And you know, the benefit to the grandparents in that, and the great grandparents on their own lifespan and their mental health in terms of being around so many people, I think that's just wonderful, you know.
Yeah, and we also have a lot of contact to fitness operators, and they also see, like, in the very early days, it's all of the people who still go to work, so they go and exercise before work. But then in those hours when office hours starts, that's where the retirees are coming in, and more gyms are building these lounge areas as well, right? So they exercise, but they also just hang around and are social, right? And that's also how these two things can really play together. So
Yeah.
it doesn't become one or the other. Either I'm social, or either I'm practicing
Yeah.
strength and so on.
It's about reframing, isn't it? I think, like, you know, it's about, you know, movement can be joy. It can be something that you do, like if you go to a dance class, or if you're part of like some sort of, like, you know, a paddle. That's why paddles become so popular, because it's like you're exercising, but you're not exercising for the sake of it. You're doing it as a group, and you're getting the joy out of it, but then you're also getting the benefit of the fitness as well. And I think it's about reframing. You know, exercise and movement doesn't necessarily have to be, you know, going hell for leather at the gym. You know, it can be anything that you enjoy doing. So I think it's about reframing some of the terminology and the things that we do. I think it's about making things part of your lifestyle.
Yeah, it's exactly right. Like, if we integrate it as so it doesn't become a chore, but that we can have some fun, either by sharing it with others, or just being. I love this. There was the sociologist from the US. She said, just be unambitious. You know, like, you don't have to be all the way up here. Just like,
Yeah.
but just a little is infinitely better than nothing.
Absolutely, yeah, yeah. Because, you know, most of us aren't training to be an Olympian, are we? We're just, you know, training for like our joy and our life. And I think it's about, you know, like you say, doing, you know, little steps every day. It doesn't have to be a big goal or ambition. And you know, it's so much better to be doing something little every day rather than just going once a week for a big gym session. You know, we now know that the compounding effects of doing even just 10 minutes a day can have greater benefit. You know, we're designed to be moving as human beings. You know, we're not designed to be sitting so much. So I think the problem is just the convenience of modern day life. It's just made everything so sedentary and so easy. And I think we need to get uncomfortable and stop being so sedentary. Yeah.
Just a little bit uncomfortable.
A little bit uncomfortable, yeah.
10 minutes a day, just 10
Yeah.
minutes a day. No, our time is up. It's been fantastic to meet you. I know that there might be comments or questions coming in the comment section afterwards. I'll be forwarding those to you in order for them to get your answers on that, because I understand that you're a busy person. But I want to thank you so much for joining us and for sharing your insights from your background as a doctor, but also from your clinic with female health. And to all viewers out there, I hope you took something away. Feel free to follow Lubna on social media and look up her clinic. And I just want to end off with hope you took something good away. And then thank you, Lubna, for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me, Peter. It was a great conversation. Thank you.
Thank you.